It was supposed to be a happy day, a celebration, a moment where family and friends gathered to share in Dill's joy as she married the man she thought would be her forever. I had been by her side through everything, the laughs, the tears, the countless late-night talks. She was like a sister to me. And despite everything I'd been through with Mark, despite the pain I'd endured in my own marriage, I was genuinely happy for her. She had found someone who made her happy, and that was all that mattered. But that was before everything went wrong. I remember walking into the ballroom, the soft hum of chatter filling the air. The lights were dim, casting a romantic glow over the entire room. There was a string quartet playing in the background, the delicate sound of violins filling the air. Everything was so perfect, so beautiful. I had spent the last few months helping Dill plan every little detail of the wedding, from the decorations to the flowers, and now, seeing it all come to life, I felt a sense of pride. But as I stepped further into the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't know if it was the pressure of the situation or if it was just me feeling a little out of place, but I couldn't help the unsettling feeling in my stomach. And then, as soon as I saw her, Dill, in her beautiful white dress, I knew that something had shifted. She wasn't the same person she had been just a few months ago. There was a coldness in her eyes that wasn't there before. I brushed it off, thinking it was just wedding jitters, but as the night wore on, I realized I couldn't ignore it. It all came to a head during dinner. We were all sitting at the long, elegantly set table, enjoying the meal. Laughter and conversation flowed freely around us, but something about it all felt like a show. Everyone was putting on their best faces, pretending like everything was perfect, and for a moment, I wanted to believe it was. But deep down, I couldn't. Dill was sitting at the head of the table, and when she caught my eye, she gave me that look, the one she used to give when she was about to say something she knew would hurt me. My heart sank. I could feel her gaze on me, and I instinctively straightened up in my chair, bracing myself for whatever she was about to say. And then it happened. "I'm so glad you could make it, Sarah," she said loudly, her voice tinged with something I couldn't place. "But I'm surprised you still showed up after everything. I mean, after all, you're just, well, a fat pig now, aren't you?" The words came out of nowhere. They hit me like a slap in the face. It took me a second to process what had just happened. I froze, staring at her, my mind racing. Did she really just call me that? In front of everyone? The room fell silent for a moment. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the humiliation flooding my body. I had never felt more exposed in my life. My hands trembled, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, to scream at her, but all I could do was sit there, numb, as everyone else at the table burst into laughter. I looked around the room, but there was no sign of anyone coming to my defense. Mark, sitting across from me, stared down at his plate, pretending he hadn't heard anything. My family, they had all turned their attention elsewhere, suddenly too busy to intervene. And there I was, sitting at a table full of people who should have cared, but who didn't. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that Dill had said those words, or the fact that no one seemed to care. I managed to get up from the table, my face flushed with embarrassment, my legs shaking beneath me. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I couldn't even look at Dill. I turned away, quickly making my way to the door, needing to escape, needing air, needing to not feel so small. I rushed out into the garden, the cool night air hitting my face, and I stopped, gripping the railing, trying to steady myself. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. I had worked so hard to get to this point in my life. I had spent years rebuilding myself after my marriage to Mark fell apart. I had taken control of my career, of my finances, and of my future. I had fought for my happiness, fought for my independence, and now here I was, reduced to nothing more than a cruel insult. A fat pig. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall in silence. How had it come to this? How had Dill, the person I thought I could always count on, turned on me like this? It was hours later when I returned to the house. I didn't know what I was expecting, an apology, comfort, something, anything to take away the sting of the words she had thrown at me. But instead, I was met with silence. I entered the house, and there they all were, Mark, my parents, my siblings, sitting in the living room, talking as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just been humiliated in front of everyone. The moment I stepped into the room, Mark glanced up, but there was no apology in his eyes. No concern for what had just happened. He was too caught up in whatever he was talking about to care. I stood there, frozen, feeling like an intruder in my own life. They didn't see me. They didn't care about what had just happened. And I realized in that moment that the only person I had left to rely on was myself. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, my mind racing, replaying the events of the evening over and over again. What had I done to deserve this? What had I done to deserve being treated like this by the people I loved? I was angry, but more than that, I was tired. Tired of feeling like I wasn't good enough. Tired of living in the shadow of everyone else's expectations. I had spent so much of my life trying to please everyone, trying to fit into the mold of what others wanted me to be. But now, I realized something. I didn't need to be anyone else. I was enough. I always had been. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't going to let this insult define me. I wasn't going to let Dill or anyone else dictate my worth. It was time to take control. I spent the next few days reflecting, trying to understand why Dill's words had hurt me so much. It wasn't just the insult itself, it was everything that had led to it. The years of feeling like I wasn't enough, of constantly comparing myself to others, of living in the shadow of my past mistakes. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had spent too long letting other people control my narrative. I had spent too long waiting for approval from people who didn't even value me. I was tired of being defined by other people's expectations. It was time to take charge of my life. I enrolled in a self-improvement course, something I had always wanted to do but never had the courage to try. I began working on my body, not to lose weight or change my appearance for anyone else, but to feel strong and healthy. I started writing again, rediscovering the passions I had pushed aside for years. But most importantly, I decided that I wasn't going to let the past define me. I wasn't going to let Dill's words or Mark's indifference control my future. I was taking back my power. And just as I began to feel the weight lifting, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I was no longer the woman who let herself be hurt by others. I was no longer the woman who allowed insults to define her. I had rediscovered my worth. And that, more than anything, was worth fighting for. As I stood at the window, looking out over the city, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. I wasn't a fat pig, I wasn't a nobody. I was Sarah, and I was ready to reclaim my life. The sting of Dill's words didn't disappear overnight, and I had to face the fact that it would take more than a few days to shake off the hurt. I thought I had made peace with my past, but this betrayal, this public humiliation, dug deep. It made me question my entire existence, but more than that, it made me realize just how much I had been allowing others to define me. I woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in years. The sun was barely up, casting a soft glow through the window. It felt like the perfect moment to make a choice. I had spent too long living in the shadow of other people's expectations. I had spent too long wondering if I was enough, but I was done with that. Today, I was going to take control of my own life. I had already begun to take the first steps toward reclaiming myself, but I knew I had to go deeper. This wasn't just about external change, it was about healing internally. I wasn't going to let the harsh words of a person who had once been my friend shape my reality any longer. Dill was not the source of my happiness, and neither was anyone else. I had to find that for myself. The first thing I did that morning was something I hadn't done in years. I took out a notebook and began writing. It wasn't a journal entry. It wasn't a to-do list. It was a declaration. I wrote down my goals, not just for my career, but for myself as a person. I wrote down the things I wanted to accomplish, the things that would make me feel proud of who I was and the person I was becoming. I listed everything I wanted: confidence, independence, a business of my own, a healthy lifestyle, a sense of self-worth that wasn't reliant on anyone but me. And as I wrote each goal, I realized something important. I was capable of achieving all of it. The power to change my life had always been in my hands. I spent the next few days focusing on what I could control. I enrolled in a course about business management, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. I signed up for gym classes, not to lose weight, but to feel stronger, to take care of myself. I reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in a while, people who had supported me in the past, and reconnected with them. But most importantly, I spent time with myself. I learned to listen to my own voice, not the voice of the people around me. I learned to make decisions based on what was right for me, not what I thought others wanted me to do. A week later, I found myself sitting in a cafe with my old friend Lily. She had been a constant presence in my life, even when I had distanced myself from her after the divorce. But now, I was reconnecting with her, and it felt good to have someone who truly cared for me, someone who didn't judge me for my past mistakes. Lily was always the kind of person who made you feel at ease, and this meeting was no different. As soon as I sat down, she smiled and poured me a cup of tea, her eyes full of warmth and understanding. "So, how have you been?" she asked, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "I've been doing better. Honestly, I've been working on myself. I'm not going to lie, the last few weeks have been tough, but I've decided to stop letting the past define me." Lily nodded, her eyes full of empathy. "You've always been so strong, Sarah. You've got this, I know you do." Her words were like a balm to my soul. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them until then. I'm trying to be stronger. I've realized I've been letting people's words, especially Dill's, control my life for too long. Lily gave me a knowing look. "You've always been a fighter. You just need to remind yourself of that." It was true. I had spent so much of my life putting others' needs first, trying to make everyone happy, that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had forgotten to listen to my own needs, but that was changing. I was starting to take back control. The next few weeks were filled with small victories. I spent more time focusing on my business idea, researching and planning every step. I had always dreamed of starting my own business, but it had always seemed like something too far out of reach. Now, it felt possible. I realized that the only thing holding me back was me. I began attending workshops, reading books on entrepreneurship, and making contacts in the industry. I didn't know exactly how it would all come together, but I wasn't going to let fear stop me from trying. And then there was the gym. At first, I had struggled to even show up, but after a few sessions, I began to feel stronger. It wasn't about losing weight anymore. It was about feeling good in my own skin, about gaining confidence in my body. Every time I pushed myself to do just one more rep, I reminded myself that I was stronger than I thought. One day, while I was working on my business plan at a cafe, I received an unexpected message. It was from Mark. I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart racing. It had been weeks since I had heard from him, and I hadn't expected him to reach out. The message was simple, but the words stung. "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I'm sorry for how things turned out. I was wrong." For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell him how much he had hurt me. Part of me wanted to let the anger out. But then I remembered the decision I had made. I wasn't going to let his apology control me. I had already let go of the pain, and I wasn't going to let him back into my life, not on my terms. Instead of responding immediately, I took a deep breath and put my phone down. I didn't need closure from him. I had already closed that chapter. It was time for me to move forward without him, without anyone from my past who had made me feel small. The next few months passed quickly, filled with progress and setbacks, but mostly progress. I worked harder than I ever had before, pushing myself to grow. I reached out to potential clients, built a website for my business, and started gaining traction. I realized that this was something I could really do. This was my thing, something I had built from scratch, something that wasn't reliant on anyone else's validation. I also began to see a shift in my relationships. I had begun setting boundaries with people who didn't add value to my life, including Dill. She tried to reach out, to apologize, but I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her anymore. One evening, I sat with Jake, my son, who had noticed the change in me. He had always been supportive, but now, I could see a new level of admiration in his eyes. "Mom, you're doing really well," he said one evening, looking up from his homework. "I'm really proud of you." I smiled, feeling a rush of emotion. "Thanks, buddy, I'm proud of me too." That night, as I tucked him into bed, I thought about how far I had come. I had been through so much, but I was stronger than ever. I wasn't the person I used to be, the person who let others define her. I was someone new, someone who had learned to trust herself again. And as I looked down at Jake, I knew that everything I was doing was for him. I wanted him to see what strength looked like. I wanted him to know that no matter what happened in life, we could rise above it. Together. Weeks turned into months, and my business continued to grow. I had gained confidence in my work and even more in myself. The fear that used to control me had all but disappeared. Every decision I made, every step I took, was a reflection of the woman I had become. And then, one day, I got a call that changed everything. It was from a potential investor who was interested in partnering with me to take my business to the next level. I sat there for a moment, stunned by the opportunity. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I thought about everything that had led to this point, the pain, the betrayal, the hurtful words from Dill. But I also realized that all of it had made me stronger. It had led me here, to this point where I was about to take the next big step in my life. I was no longer waiting for permission from anyone. I was in control of my future, and I was ready for whatever came next. As I sat at my desk, looking out at the city, I knew one thing for sure: I had made it. I had fought for myself, and now I was living the life I had always dreamed of. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And no one, not Mark, not Dill, not anyone, could take that from me. The best was yet to come. The night after the wedding still felt like a haze. I couldn't escape the images of Dill's face as she'd called me that cruel name, the laughter echoing in my mind. I wanted to drown it out, to pretend it never happened, but I couldn't. The hurt was like an open wound that hadn't yet healed. I thought I had put my past behind me, but in that moment, I realized how much of me was still tied to the person I used to be, the person who let people's opinions and judgments define her. But that wasn't me anymore, or at least it didn't have to be. The following morning, I woke up early, the sunlight streaming through the blinds. I couldn't let myself sink back into the sadness I had spent too many years in. I had to make a choice: stay stuck in the shame and humiliation that Dill had piled on top of me, or rise above it, like I had done so many times before. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to ignore the tears that still stung my eyes. But instead of seeing the tired, broken woman I had been, I saw something else. I saw strength. I saw resilience. I saw a woman who had been knocked down but was ready to get back up. I had no idea what was next for me, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my past. The first step was deciding that I wasn't going to let Dill's words define me. It wasn't about proving her wrong, it was about proving to myself that I could be more than the version of me she had so callously dismissed. I wasn't the fat pig she had called me. I wasn't a nobody. I was a woman with value, with potential, and with dreams. But even as I made that decision, I knew I needed to do something more than just say it to myself. I needed to show the world, and more importantly myself, that I was serious about this change. I started with the basics. I went for a walk that morning, feeling the cool air on my face as I breathed in deeply. It wasn't a long walk, just around the block, but it felt like a small victory. My body felt stiff, like I hadn't moved in years, but with every step I could feel a shift happening inside me. I was doing something for myself. And that, in itself, was a big step. Later that day, I took a deeper look at my life. I wasn't the woman I used to be, and I knew I had a long way to go, but I also knew I wasn't going to sit in that house, waiting for life to change for me. I needed a plan. I needed a direction. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. I wrote down my goals not just for my career, but for my personal growth. What did I want for myself? What did I want my life to look like in a year, 5 years, 10? It felt good to put it all down on paper, to see my dreams laid out in front of me. I didn't know how I would get there, but I knew I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to make it happen. One of the first things I wrote was simple: I want to be proud of myself. It wasn't about getting rich or famous. It wasn't about being the perfect mom or the perfect businesswoman. It was about doing the things that made me feel whole. And so, I started. I signed up for a business course online, something I had been putting off for years. I'd always dreamed of starting my own company, but I didn't think I had the knowledge or the confidence to do it. Now, I was going to learn. I was going to push myself in ways I hadn't before. The next few weeks were filled with ups and downs, moments of doubt and bursts of excitement, but I kept going. I kept taking small steps forward, no matter how difficult it seemed. I went to the gym, not to lose weight, but to feel strong again. I worked on my business plan, researching, writing, dreaming. The more I focused on myself, the more I realized how much of my life had been spent waiting. Waiting for Mark's approval. Waiting for Dill's validation. Waiting for the right moment to start. But there was no right moment. There was only now, and if I kept waiting, I would miss my chance. One evening, after a particularly long day, I sat on the couch, exhausted but feeling proud of what I had accomplished. I had done something for myself. I had started building my future. I wasn't the same person I had been when Dill called me that name, and I was never going back. But just as I was about to get up, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "How are you, honey? We haven't talked in a while. I know things have been tough, but I just wanted to check in. Love you." I read the message twice, the weight of it settling on my chest. I hadn't really talked to my mom about everything that had happened. She knew about Mark, of course, but I hadn't gone into detail about the hurtful things Dill had said. I wasn't sure I was ready to talk about it. Not yet, but I also knew that I couldn't keep bottling things up. I quickly typed out a response, keeping it simple but honest. "I'm doing better, Mom. Thank you for checking in. It's been hard, but I'm making progress. I'm working on myself." A few minutes later, she responded, "I'm so proud of you. You've always been strong, Sarah. I know you'll get through this. I'm here if you need me." Her words, simple as they were, made me feel lighter. My mom had always been there for me, and while I hadn't always appreciated it, I was starting to understand how much her support had meant. A few days later, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails, when I came across an invitation to a networking event for entrepreneurs. It was something I had been considering for a while but had put off. It was easy to come up with excuses not to go. I wasn't ready yet, I didn't know anyone there, I wasn't sure I could handle the pressure. But that morning, something was different. I wasn't going to let fear keep me from doing what I had to do. I registered for the event. The day of the networking event arrived, and I nearly backed out. My nerves were through the roof. What if I didn't fit in? What if I embarrassed myself? What if I wasn't good enough? But then I remembered why I had signed up. I was doing this for me. I was doing this to take my life back. And if I didn't show up for myself now, I never would. The event was held in a large conference room with people milling about, networking, and chatting. I walked in, feeling like a fish out of water, but I kept my head high and my shoulders back. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to learn and grow. I spent the next few hours talking to people, exchanging business cards, and asking questions. I was surprised at how comfortable I felt once I started engaging with others. Everyone was in the same boat, trying to make their mark and build something new. I wasn't alone. By the end of the evening, I had made some great connections, including one potential business partner who was interested in collaborating with me. As I left the event, I felt a rush of excitement. I had done it. I had pushed past my fears, and it had paid off. The following weeks were filled with more small victories. I got my first client, signed a partnership deal, and continued building my business. But more than that, I started to feel like I was truly living again. The pain from Dill's words was still there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. I had proven to myself that I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need to be validated by anyone else's standards. I was enough, just as I was. One evening, I received a call from Jake. He had been spending more time at his friend's house recently, and I missed him more than I expected. "Hey, Mom," he said. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. You've been so happy, you seem different." I smiled at his observation. "I am happy, Jake. I'm doing something for myself. I'm building something I'm proud of." "I can tell," he said. "You're the strongest person I know. I'm really proud of you." His words made my heart swell with pride. This journey wasn't just for me. It was for him, too. I wanted him to see what it meant to rise above, to overcome obstacles, and to stand up for yourself. "Thanks, buddy," I said softly. "You've always been my biggest supporter. I'm doing this for both of us." And in that moment, I realized just how far I had come. I was no longer the woman who let others define her. I was no longer waiting for someone to give me permission to be happy, to be successful, to be myself. The future was bright, and I was ready for it. I had taken back control of my life, and I was no longer afraid to chase my dreams. I wasn't defined by the past, by the people who had hurt me, or by the pain I had endured. I was writing my own story, one step at a time. And nothing, not even Dill's cruel words, could take that away from me. The days following the networking event felt like a blur. I was riding a wave of momentum, yet beneath the surface, the old doubts still lingered, whispering quietly in my ear. Was I really capable of doing this? Could I truly succeed in building a business from scratch? It wasn't as if I hadn't been successful before. I had always been good at making things work, taking care of others, running a household, juggling everything that life had thrown my way. But this was different. This was about me. This was about building something for me, something I could call my own, and it terrified me. But I refused to let fear hold me back. Fear had always been the thing that had kept me in my comfort zone, even when it wasn't really comfortable at all. It was fear that had kept me in a toxic relationship, fear that had kept me from starting my own business, fear that had kept me from believing in my own worth. And now, I was fighting back against that fear. The first few weeks of diving into my business were filled with mixed emotions. There were moments of absolute exhilaration, like when I signed my first official client. I felt a rush of pride, like I had just won a major victory. But there were also moments when I felt completely overwhelmed. There was so much to do: paperwork, meetings, marketing, networking. It was like learning a whole new language. Every step felt like I was climbing a mountain, but I was determined to get to the top. I spent hours researching, reading books on entrepreneurship, listening to podcasts, and watching YouTube videos about starting a business. But it wasn't just about the business side of things. I had to confront my own inner fears, too. I had to ask myself the hard questions. What did I want out of this? What was I willing to risk? And most importantly, what would I do if I failed? The thought of failing terrified me, but it also pushed me forward. I realized that failure wasn't something to fear. It was just a stepping stone to success. If I wanted to make this work, I had to be prepared to fall and get back up again. I remember one night, just after I had wrapped up a long day of work. I was sitting in front of my computer, staring at the screen. The numbers, the goals, the to-do list, it was all overwhelming. My fingers hovered above the keyboard as I tried to gather my thoughts, but nothing seemed to come together. It felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. That's when Jake came into the room. He had always been my rock, the one person I could count on when everything else felt like it was falling apart. He was only 12, but he had this wisdom about him that made me believe in myself even when I didn't. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, standing in the doorway. I smiled, trying to hide the frustration that had built up inside me. "Yeah, I'm just tired, a lot of work to do." He walked over and sat beside me. "You've been working so hard lately. I can see it. You're doing great." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thanks, buddy. That means more to me than you know." Jake's gaze softened. "I know you'll make it. You always do. You just need to believe in yourself. You've got this, Mom." I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride. My son had always been my greatest source of motivation. His belief in me reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. He was rooting for me, and that was more than enough to keep me going. "I do believe in myself, Jake," I said, my voice steady. "I'm going to make this work. I'm doing it for both of us." That night, I went to bed with a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. I realized that the support of the people who truly cared about me, especially Jake, was all I needed. Everything else would fall into place. The next day, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. I got up early, spent a little time organizing my thoughts, and mapped out my goals for the day. By the end of the week, I had made significant progress. I had created a website for my business, designed marketing materials, and reached out to a few potential clients. Slowly but surely, I was putting the pieces together. But as my business grew, so did the pressure. It wasn't just about finding clients or making money anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was worthy of this success. I had spent so many years feeling invisible, like I didn't matter. And now, I was creating something that was mine. I couldn't afford to doubt myself now. The following weeks were a mix of excitement and anxiety. I landed a few more clients, each one adding a new layer of confidence to my foundation. But there were also days when I felt like I was just spinning my wheels, wondering if it was all worth it. I had moments of doubt when the fear of failure crept back in, trying to take root. One afternoon, I received a message from Mark. It had been months since we'd spoken, and I had moved on from him in every way possible. But the message caught me off guard. Sarah, I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I've been thinking a lot, and I regret everything that happened between us. I miss you. I sat there, staring at the screen, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to send a scathing reply, to tell him just how much he had hurt me. But I didn't. I wasn't that person anymore. Instead, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I wasn't interested in reopening that chapter of my life. I had already forgiven myself for everything that had happened, and I wasn't going to allow him back into my life. Not now, not ever again. I deleted the message without replying. I didn't need his approval to feel validated. I was moving forward, and I was no longer looking back. As I focused more on my business, I started seeing the fruits of my labor. Clients came and went, but my reputation was beginning to build. People were starting to take notice of what I was doing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. I spent less time worrying about what other people thought of me and more time doing what I loved. I began to feel more confident in my abilities, and the more I believed in myself, the more success came my way. One night, as I sat at my desk, finalizing a proposal for a new client, I received a call from Lily. She had been following my progress, and I could hear the excitement in her voice when she answered. Sarah, I just wanted to check in and see how things were going. I've been watching you, and I can't tell you how proud I am of you. You're doing incredible things. I smiled, a wave of gratitude washing over me. Thanks, Lily. It's been tough, but I'm getting there. I've learned a lot about myself along the way. She laughed softly. You've always had it in you, you just needed to realize it, and now you're unstoppable. Her words meant more than she could know. They reminded me of everything I had overcome and how far I had come. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. As the months went on, I continued to grow. My business was flourishing, and I felt a sense of pride I had never felt before. But it wasn't just about the money or the clients. It was about the person I had become. I was strong, confident, and self-sufficient. I had learned to value myself for who I was, not for the approval of others. And then, one day, I received an unexpected invitation. It was from Dill. She wanted to meet. At first, I wasn't sure what to think. Why would she want to meet after everything that had happened? But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to see her. When we met, Dill seemed different. There was no trace of the coldness she had shown me at the wedding. Instead, she looked vulnerable, almost apologetic. Sarah, she said, her voice soft, I owe you an apology for everything. I was wrong, and I'm sorry for what I said. I never should have treated you the way I did. I stared at her, my heart conflicted. Part of me wanted to hear the apology, but another part of me was already beyond it. I had moved on. I had forgiven her, but I had no intention of letting her back into my life. I appreciate the apology, I said calmly, but I don't need it. I've already forgiven you. The truth is, I don't have any room for people who treat me like that in my life anymore. Her face fell, but I wasn't going to soften my words. I had learned that I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel good about myself, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else undermine that. Leaving the cafe that day, I felt a sense of finality. The past was behind me. I had grown stronger because of it, and now I was free. I wasn't just a woman who had been hurt. I was a woman who had healed, who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. It's funny how life can sometimes give you a jolt when you least expect it. For years, I had lived in a cycle of self-doubt, always questioning if I was good enough, if I was doing enough, if I was worthy of happiness. And then, in the span of a few months, I had gone from that woman, the one who shrank in the background, the one who allowed others to define her, to someone entirely different. The transformation wasn't instant. It wasn't some magical moment where everything clicked. But there was a shift, a steady climb that had started with me deciding, for the first time in my life, to take control. The weeks after meeting with Dill were filled with a strange sense of closure. I had expected the conversation to go differently, but in the end, I realized something important. I didn't need her apology to move forward. I had already healed. The woman who had once crumbled under her cruelty was no longer the same person. I wasn't going to let her define me, and I wasn't going to let anyone else do it either. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a new strength in me. The old Sarah, the one who had spent too much time seeking approval and acceptance, was gone. She had been replaced by someone who knew her worth, someone who didn't need anyone to tell her she was valuable. I spent the next few days processing everything. I continued to work on my business, but more importantly, I worked on myself. I started doing things for me, not because I thought it would make someone else happy, but because I deserved it. I started exercising more, not to lose weight, but to feel strong. I spent more time outside, taking long walks in the park. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones who didn't see me as just a mother or a wife, but as a person in my own right. But there was still something gnawing at me. The pain of the past wasn't entirely gone. It wasn't just Dill and the family's rejection. It was Mark and the years I had spent trying to make our marriage work. It was the fact that I had given so much of myself to someone who had never truly appreciated me. I wasn't ready to let that go yet. I needed to face it. I needed to let go of the anger that had been holding me back. One evening, I decided to reach out to Mark. I wasn't sure why, but I needed to hear it from him. I needed to hear the truth, the full truth. We hadn't spoken in months, and while I was no longer the same woman who had been hurt by his betrayal, I still had questions. I had to know if he was truly sorry, or if he was just trying to ease his conscience. I texted him, "Can we talk? It's been a while and I think we need closure." To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. "Of course, I've been thinking a lot about everything." We set a time to meet the following week. I didn't expect much, but I knew that this conversation was something I had to have for myself, no one else. When I saw Mark again, I was surprised by how much time had passed. He looked different. There was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before, a tiredness, maybe, or a sense of regret, but I didn't feel the need to dissect his every move. This meeting wasn't for him, it was for me. We met at a small cafe near the park where we had once gone on dates. I hadn't been back there since everything had fallen apart, but as I stepped inside, it felt strangely familiar. "Hi," he said softly when I sat down across from him. "I'm glad you agreed to meet." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I think it's time for us to have an honest conversation about everything." He sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I know. I've been thinking about what happened for months, and I know I've hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you an apology. I was selfish. I didn't value you the way you deserved." His words, though expected, still hit me like a ton of bricks. A part of me wanted to scream at him for everything he had put me through, but instead, I took a deep breath. I wasn't here to get an apology that would somehow fix everything. I was here for closure, for my peace of mind. "I've forgiven you, Mark," I said, surprising myself. "But not because you asked for it. I forgave you because holding onto that anger was keeping me stuck. I don't need your apology to move forward." He stared at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "What do you mean? I thought you needed to hear me apologize." "No," I said softly. "I needed to hear myself forgive you, and I've done that. I've let go of the past, Mark. I'm not who I was when I married you. I'm not that person anymore." The silence between us was heavy. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a strange sense of detachment. The man sitting across from me was a stranger, and I was okay with that. "I've learned so much about myself over the past few months," I continued. "And I don't need anyone else to define me. Not you, not Dill, not anyone. I've built a life for myself, and I'm proud of it." He nodded, his face softening. "I can see that, and I'm glad you found peace." I sat back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of his presence had always felt suffocating, but now it felt like I was finally free from it. It was time to close this chapter. "Thank you, Mark," I said, standing up, "but I don't need you in my life anymore. Not in the way you think." He didn't try to stop me. He didn't ask me to stay or offer empty promises. He simply nodded, and I walked away, feeling stronger with every step. A few weeks later, I was sitting at my desk, working on a new project when the phone rang. It was from my lawyer, Sarah. "Sarah, I have some good news," she said, her voice bright. "Your business is officially registered. You're all set to start operating legally." I felt my heart swell with pride. "Thank you, Sarah. This is just the beginning, isn't it?" "You've worked hard for this," she replied, "and I have no doubt that you'll succeed. This is your moment." I couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long, but I had finally reached the place I had been working toward for so long. I had started my business. I had found my voice. And I was no longer waiting for someone to tell me I was worthy. I already knew that I was. The next few months were a blur of meetings, work, and personal growth. I kept pushing myself, determined to build something meaningful. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth having ever is. And through every challenge, I continued to grow. My confidence increased, my skills improved, and my business flourished. But it wasn't just about the success. It was about the journey. It was about learning to trust myself, to love myself, to believe that I could do anything I set my mind to. And I was doing it. Every day, I was living proof of what could happen when you took control of your own life. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with Jake. He was no longer the little boy who had depended on me for everything. He was growing up, becoming more independent, but he still looked to me for guidance. And that, more than anything, was what kept me going. "I'm really proud of you, Mom," Jake said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've come a long way. I can see how happy you are now." I smiled at him, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thanks, buddy. I'm proud of me too, but I wouldn't have made it this far without you." He grinned, his eyes sparkling. "You're the best, Mom." And in that moment, I realized that this journey wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing Jake the power of resilience, of never giving up. I wanted him to know that no matter how hard life gets, we can always rise above it. And that was the greatest gift I could give him. The road ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had learned to trust myself. I had learned to stand up for myself. And I knew that no matter what came my way, I had the strength to handle it. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. And nothing, not Mark, not Dill, not anyone, could take that away from me. The first few months after Mark and I had our conversation passed in a whirlwind. I had put a lot of effort into growing my business, setting clear goals, and finally focusing on the things that mattered to me. But even though everything seemed to be falling into place, there were still days when I woke up feeling uncertain. I had done so much to reclaim my life, but the echoes of my past still haunted me. I had to keep reminding myself that I was not the same person anymore, that I had taken control of my future, and that I was worthy of everything I was building. I had made the decision to leave the past behind and move forward. But every now and then, I felt that tug, that little voice telling me I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't strong enough. It was like an old habit that I had to fight against constantly. But I kept reminding myself, change wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a process, and I was in the middle of it. I knew I had made significant strides, but the road to full self-acceptance was still a journey. One afternoon, I was sitting in my home office, reviewing some client proposals, when I received a text from Lily. It had been a while since we last met, and I missed her. She had been a constant in my life, always supportive, always encouraging. She knew my struggles, my victories, and the ups and downs of my journey. "Lily, hey Sarah, how's everything going? I've been thinking about you a lot lately. We should catch up soon." I smiled as I read the message, feeling a sense of warmth in my chest. Lily had always been there for me, even when I pushed everyone away. She had been my rock in ways I hadn't realized until recently. I quickly typed back, "I'm doing well, just busy with work, would love to catch up. How about this weekend?" A few minutes later, she replied, "That sounds great. Let's meet for coffee on Saturday. I've missed you." As the weekend drew closer, I found myself looking forward to it more than I realized. I had always appreciated Lily's no-nonsense attitude. She told me what I needed to hear, not just what I wanted to hear. And for the first time in a while, I needed that. I needed someone to give me that tough love, someone who wouldn't let me settle for less than I was capable of. Saturday came, and I found myself sitting across from Lily in our favorite cafe. It was small, cozy, and always smelled like freshly baked pastries. The clinking of coffee cups, the hum of quiet conversations, everything about the place made me feel at ease. Lily didn't waste any time. She could always tell when something was on my mind. "So, how's everything going, really?" I smiled softly, stirring my coffee. "It's going well. I'm making progress with my business, but I still have moments of doubt. You know, the usual stuff." She raised an eyebrow. "The usual stuff? You mean the stuff where you second-guess yourself?" I chuckled, feeling a little embarrassed. Yeah, that. I'm doing well, but I still have this voice in my head telling me I'm not good enough, that I'm just pretending to have it all together. Lily nodded, her expression softening. That voice is a liar, Sarah. You've been through too much to let it control you. You've already come so far. You've built something from the ground up. You're doing the work, and that's what matters. Her words hit home. She was right. I had spent years doubting myself, letting others' opinions shape the way I saw myself. And now, here I was, building my future on my own terms. The voice in my head that told me I wasn't enough had no place in my life anymore. I know, I said, my voice steady. I just have to remind myself that I've earned this. I've earned the right to be confident, to believe in myself. That's right, Lily said, her eyes locking with mine. And you've got to stop letting your past dictate your future. The Sarah I knew back then, the one who doubted herself all the time, she's gone. She's not coming back. You're a completely different person now. I sat back, letting her words sink in. It felt good to hear someone acknowledge how far I'd come. I had spent so much time feeling stuck in the past, clinging to the version of myself that had been defined by others' opinions. But now, I was free. I'm proud of you, Sarah, Lily continued, her voice warm. You've done what most people can't do. You've found yourself again, and that's something worth celebrating. After our coffee, I felt lighter. The weight that had been pressing on my chest seemed to lift, if only a little. I had spent so much time hiding from my own strength, afraid of what it meant to embrace it. But now, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to face whatever came next. The following week, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a client contract, when I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. It was a long shot, but I decided to pick up anyway. I didn't expect much, but I was always open to new opportunities. Hello, I answered. Hi, is this Sarah? Yes, it is. Who's this? This is Rachel from Business Name. I came across your website and your work, and I have to say, I'm impressed. I think we could work together on a few projects, and I wanted to see if you'd be interested in collaborating. My heart skipped a beat. I had heard of the company she mentioned. They were well known in the industry and had a reputation for working with top-tier talent. This was a huge opportunity. I quickly jotted down notes as she spoke, my mind racing with excitement. Absolutely, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. I'd love to hear more about the collaboration. We talked for another half hour, discussing potential projects, goals, and timelines. By the end of the conversation, I was on cloud nine. Not only had I impressed someone in the industry, but I had also secured my first major business collaboration. This was the moment I had been working toward. As soon as the call ended, I leaned back in my chair, my breath catching in my throat. I had done it. I had earned this. This was the validation I had been waiting for, but it wasn't the approval from others that mattered anymore. It was the validation I had given myself. The next few months felt like a dream. My business continued to grow, and I finally started to believe in my abilities. But the most important change was internal. I had learned how to trust myself. I had learned how to set boundaries, how to stand up for myself, and how to stop apologizing for being who I was. I was building something real, something I could be proud of. I no longer felt like I was just floating through life, waiting for something to happen. I was making it happen. But even with all my progress, there were still moments when I felt vulnerable. I hadn't completely let go of the pain from my past, but I was getting closer. And I knew that I didn't need anyone's permission to be happy. I didn't need to seek validation from anyone anymore. I was enough, just as I was. One evening, I received another unexpected message, this time from Dill. It had been months since we had spoken, and I had moved on from the resentment I had felt toward her. Still, seeing her name on my phone made my heart skip a beat. Sarah, I've been thinking about everything. I wanted to apologize. I was wrong to say what I did. I should never have hurt you. I stared at the screen for a while, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A part of me wanted to respond, to let her know just how much her words had hurt me. But the bigger part of me realized that it wasn't about her anymore. I had already forgiven her, but I didn't need her apology to move on. I typed back simply, "Thank you for your apology, but I've already forgiven you. I'm moving on." And with that, I let go of the last piece of my past. I had forgiven myself, I had forgiven her, and I was finally free. As I sat in my office, looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. I had faced the darkness, and I had come out stronger. I no longer needed anyone's approval because I had learned to approve of myself. I was proud of who I had become. And as I moved forward, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing, no one could ever take that away from me. It's strange how quickly life can change. Just a few months ago, I was sitting in the dark, buried in the weight of betrayal and self-doubt, questioning if I would ever be able to get back on my feet. And now I was standing tall, running my own business, carving out a future that was mine. My days weren't perfect. There were still struggles, moments of doubt, but I had learned something important. I was capable of facing whatever came my way. It was early morning when I received an email that took my breath away. It was from Rachel, the businesswoman I'd met months ago. She had been the first person to really see my potential, to believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. "Sarah, I'm thrilled to let you know that we'd like to move forward with the collaboration we discussed. We're excited about the possibilities ahead and can't wait to work with you." I sat there, staring at the words on the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the opportunity I had been working for, the chance to take my business to a level I hadn't even dreamed of. But as I let the excitement build, I also felt a sense of fear creeping in. What if I wasn't good enough? What if I couldn't handle the pressure? What if I failed? I knew it was normal to have these doubts, but I had also learned to recognize them as the old me, the person who had been afraid to step into her own power. And I wasn't that person anymore. I took a deep breath and typed a reply, my fingers steady as I thanked her for the opportunity. I wasn't going to let fear hold me back. I had worked too hard to let it stop me now. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. There were meetings with potential clients, calls with business partners, and late nights working on the logistics of the project. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. I was seeing my vision come to life, one step at a time. Jake noticed the change in me, and I could see the pride in his eyes whenever he talked about my success. He had always been my biggest cheerleader, but now I could see the respect he had for me growing every day. I wasn't just his mom. I was a force to be reckoned with. "You're really doing it, Mom," Jake said one evening as we sat at the kitchen table, eating dinner together. "I'm so proud of you." I smiled at him, my heart full. "Thanks, buddy. You know, this wouldn't be happening without you. You've always believed in me, and that means the world to me." He grinned, his eyes bright with admiration. "You're the best, Mom. I always knew you had it in you." I couldn't stop smiling. There was something so powerful about hearing those words from my son. It wasn't just that he believed in me, it was that he saw me, truly saw me, and that meant everything. As my business began to grow, so did my sense of purpose. I was no longer the woman who had let other people's opinions define her. I had learned to define myself, and that was the most powerful feeling in the world. I spent my days building my company, making connections, learning, growing. I was proud of how far I had come, but I knew there was still more to do. My journey wasn't over yet. There were still lessons to learn, obstacles to overcome, and challenges to face. But with each step, I felt stronger. A month after the big collaboration deal, I received another email, this one even more unexpected than the last. It was from a prestigious business magazine, offering to feature me in an upcoming issue about women entrepreneurs who had turned their passions into successful businesses. My heart skipped a beat as I read the email. This was huge. This was the kind of recognition I had only dreamed of, and as I stared at the email, I realized something. I had earned it. I didn't just get to this point by luck or chance. I got here because I refused to give up, because I chose to fight even when it felt like I was losing, because I believed in myself even when no one else did. I called Sarah, my lawyer and business mentor, to share the news. "Sarah, I just got an email from Women in Business magazine. They want to feature me. They want to write about my journey and my business." "That's amazing," she exclaimed. "You deserve it, Sarah. You've worked so hard. This is your moment." I smiled, feeling a rush of pride. "It doesn't feel real." "It is," she said. "You've earned it, and this is only the beginning." With the magazine feature coming up, I knew I had to prepare. I started thinking about my story, everything I had been through, everything I had overcome. It wasn't just about building a successful business. It was about reclaiming my life, taking back my power, and showing the world that I was capable of so much more than I had ever believed. As I wrote down my thoughts, reflecting on my journey, I realized how much I had changed. Not just on the outside, but on the inside, too. I had learned to embrace my flaws, my mistakes, and my victories. I had learned to forgive myself for the things I had been through, and more importantly, I had learned to forgive others. I had let go of the anger and resentment that had held me back for so long. And now, I was ready to share my story with the world. The day the magazine feature came out, I couldn't stop smiling. Seeing my face on the cover, reading the article about my journey was surreal. But it wasn't just the recognition that made me proud. It was the fact that I had gotten here on my own. I had built this, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. When I saw the article online, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I had worked so hard for this. I had turned my dreams into a reality. And now, the world was taking notice. The next few days were filled with messages, emails, and phone calls from friends, clients, and colleagues congratulating me on the feature. But as much as I appreciated their support, what mattered most was that I knew deep down that I had done this for me, not for anyone else. The success that followed wasn't easy. It took hard work, long hours, and moments of doubt. But with every challenge I faced, I remembered something my mom had always told me. Success isn't about avoiding failure, it's about how you rise after you fall. I had fallen many times in my life, but each time I had picked myself up, dusted myself off, and kept going. And that was what made me strong. One evening, after a long day of meetings and phone calls, I sat in the living room, looking out the window. Jake was upstairs, doing homework, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to reflect on how far I had come. I had built a life that was mine. A life where I didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. A life where I was proud of myself, not because of what others thought of me, but because of what I had accomplished on my own. I had proven that I was capable of so much more than I had ever imagined. I wasn't defined by my past. I wasn't defined by the hurt or betrayal I had suffered. I was defined by my actions, my choices, and my strength. And as I sat there, I knew one thing for sure. I had finally found the peace I had been searching for. Looking back on everything, I realized that the most powerful thing I had learned was this: I am enough. I don't need anyone's validation. I don't need anyone's approval. I am worthy of everything I've worked for, and I have earned every success, every moment of happiness, and every step forward. The journey wasn't easy, but it was mine. And in the end, that was all that mattered.